Hello, friends and extended family. Thanks for all the love and support lately. I appreciate it. We're in difficult times, and the fear of rejection that I face and we face as adoptees sometimes makes it hard to continue forward with our truth, especially when we're being attacked in our own forums quite often by subversive personalities and bad actors. But what I wanted to discuss today was the the two minds of the adoptee, and what I mean by that is that it's sometimes talked about that we develop a ghost world, right, where we have to create an imagined version of our birth family, and an imagined version of what our life would have been like or could have been like had we not been adopted. So, to begin, it's in my opinion, it would have been nearly impossible for this not to take place because depending on when you're told about adoption, I can't really speak to what it would have been like to find out later. Um, I guess the question for myself would have been, would I have suspected it anyways if no one had told me? I don't know. I can't really say. It's very hard to put myself in that position. Um, that's a lot of backing up to unpack. Um, so I don't know. I don't think finding out late is better or worse. To find out that you were lied to that whole time. Even finding out early, well, there's lots of lies that go with that. It's a big betrayal. It really hurts, and especially the way it's designed to keep us locked away from any knowledge of our past. But let's start at the beginning. So when I found out I was adopted, I was told the generic story, and that's sort of another slap in the face because most adoptees are told that generic story that your birth mother was young, and she knew she couldn't give you a good life, so she gave you up so we could give you a better life. Well, there's some problems with that right off the get-go, isn't there? So as I grew older and having an adoptive aunt who had given up a child for adoption, and finding out the reason was because at that time young women were considered whorish or unfit or mentally ill to be single mothers, morally uh, degenerate, etc., etc. So there's a conflict of information there. But you develop that ghost mother, and you come from those people, and there's something inherent that you want where you came from to not be a bad thing or bad people. And I don't think there's much escaping that. But all things being said, if your parents were drug users or young and slutty and irresponsible, or these sort of things, there's also a sort of subconscious understanding and realization that maybe you are that too. And maybe that's the reason this life you've been put into doesn't feel right and doesn't fit. So maybe you're a bad person. You see bad people on TV, you wonder, that didn't fit me. So I was forced to try to reconcile that my parents must have been good people because I felt like a good person. in a bad situation. So there's an expansion there, right? That you cannot narrow down who you are yet because you don't know the full circumstances of who your parents were. Later on, you discover your mother might have been raped. You discover maybe your mother was older. Maybe she, had an affair with a married man. There's scenarios galore. And although we have many, many commonalities, I'm always shocked and amazed at the incredible stories of people's adoptions and the incredible villains, heroes, etc. that take place in these adoptions narratives and stories. But the point being is that for at least 18 years in the closed adoption scenario, you have this running thing that you're not really prepared to let go of, or at least I wasn't. It leads me back to honesty and my commitment to honesty and transparency, especially in adoption, so that children at least can come to understand the reality of their scenario without creating this huge fantasy world about what their parents might have been like, or who they are, or where they are, because it basically opens us up to being anyone and possibly everyone, right? So we're very accepting. Well, at least I was very accepting. And, I tended towards, well, again, there wasn't the physical intimacy that a child requires in my adoptive family. And I think that was maybe a two-way street. As I've mentioned before, my poor adoptive mother had serious health issues that gave her very dry, claw-like hands and dry skin and horrible allergies and a hunched back due to scoliosis and things like that. And those are terrible things. But as a little child, we don't understand that, right? We don't understand when other kids are making fun of our adoptive mother's disabilities, being called welfare kid, things like that, because my adoptive parents were poor in all facets, intellect, spirituality, emotional, maturity, etc. So that was very sad. And even sadder that I was put there because a child needs more from their parents, especially if someone who is trained in psychological matters is choosing the home. They should know better. So anyways, this is how the sort of scenario of the two minds comes to be. And in that two minds, myself anyways, I looked for a place where I would connect and where I would fit in, right? So I had to, to get some of my needs and fulfilled, I had to hang around with some smarter kids to get some of my social needs and the attempt to connect with others. I had to hang around with the more popular and social kids. And what I found was within all these groups and cliques, there was very different perspectives and very different attitudes, and there was sort of in-group, out-groups. And part of my disconnectedness and unknowing of who I was, but knowing that I didn't match too well with my adoptive family, and there wasn't too much I wanted to connect with there. And for good reason. So I got to go hang out with the gays. I got to go hang out with the populars. I got to go hang around with the bad kids, the smokers, the drug users. I got to hang around with the smart kids. I got to go. It it was wearing, and I think maybe that's where hyper focus and some of the ADHD and stuff of that, some of that stuff came into play. And there was places where I felt very, I'd meet a woman and I'd fit really well into her family and it felt good and the relationship wouldn't work out. And, in my younger days, I attached too quickly. And, and it was real heartbreaking when things wouldn't work out. And in those times, I think maybe there was some borderline personality disorder, right? The connection and the breaking of the connection was so painful. And it led to, me walking over to that person's house and walking by and just hoping I could see them and maybe some stalkerish type behaviors. Now I'm going to give myself a break because I was a teenager and, kids will be kids and I've matured and, but even to as an adult and the disconnecting and failure in my relationships always hurts. It hurts so bad. The rejection hurts. The attacks, if I need to step away because my boundaries have been violated or whatnot, are extremely painful. I just want to be left alone from them or whatnot. But I don't know if I've fully given you the reality of my two minds. But it made me very fearful of discussing my inner world with professionals because I'd seen enough movies and stuff and gotten an impression. One flew over the cuckoo's nest, who me and another adoptee like to bring up and used to talk about quite a bit until I lost track of her. But anyways, hopefully that gives you an idea. And then, okay, so to finish off with the two minds, there was the reunion when I was in the midst of a nervous breakdown. Horrible time to do a reunion. And I don't think I've fully discussed how that nervous breakdown came to be and the brutality and the terror and horrific events that were going on at that time in my life. Because it's not 100% adoption related, although without adoption it probably never would have occurred. So anyways, the point being is I hired a private investigator, tracked down the birth families, and when I met my birth father, he was immediately understanding of kind of what I was going through, offered me the advice I needed that would have helped to avoid the situations I was in, asked what I wanted from my life, what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go back to university, which I did. It's the only thing I had planned on doing, and unfortunately my adoptive parents lied and said if I got the marks that I would go. Well, they lied. My adoptive mother sent herself to school, sent herself on numerous vacations after my grandmother passed away and left them inheritances which they've used up and gone into hawk now. I'd like to disconnect myself before they start making rules in Canada where I'll now be responsible for my adoptive parents, nursing home bills and things like that in the future, which, they had a life insurance on me my whole life, and that was a smart bet because adoptees are much more likely to kill themselves. I don't know if they have a higher insurance premium. That's something maybe one of you could find out. I think that would be very interesting information, but I'll forget by the time I'm done this video. ADD. But anyways, so when I met them and my birth father's wife was Orthodox Christian and her family's Christian, and I got to go. She kind of hustled me off up north to live with them as I was trying to recover from alcohol and stuff, and I was out on bail for another scenario that I'll tell you about later. It wasn't as bad as you might think, and in fact, I think most of you would probably applaud me for the reason I was in in prison. Um, but when I got into that scenario, it made me feel like I was home and I was around people that I connect with, even though I didn't know them. That was very unnerving. You know, it was very confusing because my whole life up to that point almost immediately seemed invalid, pretend, wrong, and there was sort of a mourning process of the life that I didn't get to be with these people where I was now, the whole life that would have led up to that. And it was incredibly scary and jarring and confusing. Brought on some psychosis, some very tortured thinking, bitterness, resentment, anger. It kind of all came. And there was anger at the adopters, and there was a need, there was a blame. Someone did this. Someone had to be held responsible, and I mean, the only person that was there was my birth father and his family, and I wanted to be with them, and you know, in the back of my head, it was this thought like, you know, I want my mother, and you know, it was just so much. It's really hard to go there, but yeah, and eventually, you know, things weren't working out. I wasn't able to work. I was in sort of a what would you call it? I had been reduced back into a child because everything had to go. Everything of my life leading up to that point was suspect, and I didn't know what was right and wrong anymore. And anyways, eventually I got back to Edmonton. I had a friend, a gay friend of mine, that rented me a room until I could kind of get set up. I could never go anywhere by myself. It always has to be with someone familiar. And I'm sure that probably has to do with adoption too, this terror of being somewhere completely unfamiliar, right? Because it just reminds you how disconnected you are in this world. Well, me. And anyways, I'd end up doing a bit of, you know, I was struggling big time, and I ended up getting back into the alcohol and then a bit of cocaine or something like that. I started hallucinating because I'd been away from that for about 4 months, and it dried out. And anyways, I ended up at the hospital and trying to check myself into the psych ward, and I talked to a nurse, and her face was hallucinating, and she was being a real nasty bitch about it. Like, I was scared, and I wanted to check myself in, and she was just rude and, you know, lacked compassion of any sort. And yeah, it was a very horrendous experience. But after that, I ended up calling my adoptive mother, and because I needed somewhere to go because it was winter in Alberta, and you know, so anyways, and they took me back in, and then I had to go back into that world, and it was readjusting into it. And once I was back into it and drinking again and stuff, well, normalcy of that world came back into being. And the other world I had to sort of partition off because it was hard to be in. So I mean, that was when I was 28. So that was 17 years ago. And now my birth dad's dead, and I haven't seen. I'd seen him a year after when I'd gone back to pick up my golf clubs from his place and stuff, and we didn't talk too much. And then a couple of years after that, my birth half brother died and was murdered here. And so, anyways, two minds. And so I don't know. It's a rare adoptee, I think, that can maybe combine all those people together, and maybe if they were similar, if they were all the same religion, or they were all the same value system, or whatnot. But the amount of factors and variables involved in the upbringing of a child is so immense that I don't know how that's even possible. Unless you had a real psychoanalysis in there that could really hit all those hot buttons of what was needed to create an upbringing that would then allow for a reintroduction to the other family. It's tough, um, but ultimately for anyone, including myself, is that we need proper education, moral education, spiritual understanding, emotional understanding. We need all these things, and these things just aren't taught. The education system we have is garbage. As far as I'm concerned, it's just an indoctrination, political programming, etc. Anyways, I'll quit before I get too down. I hopefully that helps cover things. So for people in reunions, there's some information in there to really consider about those two worlds. And for birth families, having a child come back into their lives through reunion or whatever, try to understand that there's two worlds going on, and that adoptee is going to be a little bit protective of that other world because it might be the only one they know. And although your new world might seem very compelling and wonderful, and they want to jump right in, there's going to be some mourning going on over the lives that maybe need to be shed, and the resentments and things that are going to come up that are overpowering and unexpected. I don't know how anyone can expect these sorts of things unless they've been through it, unless maybe someone was nice enough to put it online. But anyways, so hopefully that helps anybody that's trying to understand us